Part 25. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 241. Ye Qingqing's prediction was good. Ye Yan's disappearance not only made the queen anxious, but also affected the hearts of all the princes and courtiers. As the only person who might know the news about Ye Yan, Ye Qingqing became like this on the first night after returning to Shu Kingdom. A popular figure among the princes. The eldest brother Ye Muking was the first to send someone to invite him, saying that he had prepared a banquet in the mansion to welcome Ye Qingqing. I have just returned to the palace. I am tired from the journey. I want to rest early tonight, she said in a cold tone, not giving anyone any face. If you have anything to do, let's talk about it another day. The people in the shogunate's palace had no choice but to go back and report truthfully. After sending away the people from the shogunate, Ye Qingqing told the housekeeper, I won't see anyone coming tonight. I need to rest early. Yes. After having dinner in the mansion, Ye Qingqing took Yunting to the study. The long corridor cut off the hustle and bustle outside. The study area was quiet and solemn. No one could easily set foot here. Even as a princess, Ye Qingqing is not like other sisters who only focus on jewelry and beautiful clothes. Instead, she spends more time decorating the princess's mansion, studying the Kimondungia, and developing strange poisons and magic. So her study room is very large, with all kinds of books on the bookshelf. Opening the door of the study, a smell of books and agar wood hit him. Yunting walked into the study, and Ye Qingqing closed the door behind him. Yunting looked at this place in silence. This place was strange and familiar to him. What was familiar was that he had seen many books on the bookshelf, some of which were the only ones he had found for Ye Qingqing before, but what was unfamiliar was this place. Environment. Ye Qingqing silently walked to the bookshelf and pulled out a blue book on the third row of bookshelf. Yunting was about to see what she was holding when he suddenly heard a strange sound in his ears, and then a dull sound came. The bookshelf moved slowly and automatically rotated, revealing a bright corridor behind the bookshelf. Yunting turned his head to look at Ye Qingqing with some surprise. Go in. Ye Qingqing's lips raised slightly, this is the place where I practice the art of immortality. It specializes in absorbing the essence of young and beautiful men and increasing my vitality. In this way, I can maintain my appearance and strong cultivation. When you get here, you can only let me do whatever I want, and it is impossible to escape. Yunting laughed, and his gloomy mood dissipated a little. How many beautiful men have you harmed? Not much, you are the 49th. Ye Qingqing walked towards the corridor with him. The bookshelf slowly closed behind him. The corridor was so quiet that only the slight footsteps of the two of them could be heard. Thumb-sized luminous pearls hung every few meters above the wall, emitting a soft and bright light. Ye Qingqing said nothing. Yunting vaguely guessed what she was going to take him to do, and his heart felt a contraction of pain. After walking for a while, the corridor in front gradually became wider, with stone steps and corners. Some simple flower and bird patterns were carved on the stone walls on both sides, which looked dull and unfamiliar, like a child's graffiti. Yunting looked a little dazed. He didn't come back to his senses until he heard Ye Qingqing stop and reach out to pull the bell hanging on the stone wall. Ye Qingqing stood against the wall, her face clear and indifferent, and her emotions could not be seen. Yunting couldn't help but clenched his hands slightly and waited quietly. People who practice martial arts have good ears, and a sound of footsteps soon entered his eardrums. The sound should be that of a young man, and then there was another dull sound. The stone door slowly opened in front of me, and what came into view was a study room with simple and elegant furnishings and rigorous and solemn tones, giving off a long-lost sense of familiarity. Yunting pursed his lips and looked at the man who opened the stone door without saying a word. He was dressed in a warrior's attire of short green clothes. He was young and handsome, and the outline of his facial features was so familiar that he was speechless. Yunting, the man said, with suppressed excitement in his voice, "Long time no see." Yunting's throat rolled, and he nodded with difficulty, "Long time no see." Jigenzi, his best friend since childhood, is also the son of his teacher. Reunion after a long separation was an unspeakable pain for both of us. "Follow me first." Jigenzi turned and walked towards the next door. Yunting and Yeching Chen walked out of the stone door and followed him into the study. This study room is very large. A complete partition divides the study room into 3 rooms. After passing through the 2 moon doors, the child's tender voice of endorsement can be heard in the airs, "The best good is like water. Water is good for benefit, water is good for benefit, and there is no struggle for all things. He lives in a good place, his heart is kind, he is kind, his words are good, he is good in governance, he is good in doing things, and he does not fight when he is good. Hands out." Yunting's heart sank slightly. He stood outside the window and saw the little figure extending his hand obediently. The ruler hit his white and tender palm. He winced slightly in pain, but he forced himself to hold his little hand and dare not move it. The ruler struck his palm 3 times in succession, and he said humbly, "Thank you, master, for teaching me." A calm and dignified man's voice sounded, "Do you know what this article means?" "Return to master." Ruier knows. The child's young and clear voice sounded, "A good person is good at choosing a place to live, his mind is good at staying calm and unfathomable, he is good at treating others sincerely, lovingly, and selflessly, he is good at speaking and keeping his word, and he is good at keeping his word. A gentleman is good at streamlining his affairs and managing the country well. He is good at expressing his opinions and taking actions at the right time. It is because of his unquestionable virtue that he has no faults and no blame." After speaking in a respectful voice, he added, "Master, the meaning of this passage is to teach people the virtues. Whether you are serving the people or serving as an official, you should have noble moral character, a tolerant mind, a gentleman who is magnanimous, and a good person. The key to self-cultivation and conduct in life is to not fight. You would rather accept what others do to you than compete with others for gain, so there is no complaint from others." The calm man hummed and said in a deep tone, "You performed well today. Master will give you a reward. What do you want?" The child was silent for a moment and slowly shook his head. "Ruier doesn't want anything." "Do you feel wronged after being beaten?" "No." Ruier shook her head quickly. "Ruier didn't carry it well. He should be beaten. He shouldn't be wronged." "You can make a request," the man said, his voice light, "any request is fine." Ruier hesitated for a moment, then whispered, "Ruier misses the princess sister, but she went to a very far away place." Ruier Yeching Chen walked in and spoke softly, "Sister princess is back." Ruier turned her head in disbelief. The moment she saw Yeching Chen, a light of surprise appeared on her pink face. "Sister princess." He flew over like a little bee and threw himself into Yeching Chen's arms, almost unable to restrain himself. "When did sister come back?" "Ruier misses you." "I miss you so much." The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 242. Yeching Chen rubbed his little head. "During my absence, did you study and practice martial arts seriously?" Ruiyer's face changed slightly, and she instantly realized that she was a little out of character, and the master was still here, and he was too unruly just now. Ruier quickly took a step back and stood up, lowered her eyes slightly, and nodded respectfully. "Ruier doesn't dare to be lazy." Yunting's eyes were locked tightly on the pink and white child in front of him. Seeing that he was obedient, but his brows and eyes were still lively, he felt happy and sad at the same time. "Ruier," he spoke softly, his voice extremely gentle, "do you recognize me?" Ruier raised her eyes after hearing the sound and saw the man standing next to the princess sister. A trace of confusion flashed across his big, dark, and clear eyes like jewels, and then his eyebrows furrowed slightly, as if he was searching for the impression of this person in his memory. Then soon, he looked at Yunting in disbelief, his pupils slightly opened. "Uncle." Yunting's eyes were hot, and he couldn't restrain himself anymore and stepped forward, holding him tightly in his arms. "Ruier." The man holding a ruler in his hand turned around and walked over. His face was handsome and calm, and his brows were calm and calm. He looked to be 2 or 3 years older than Ji Jinzi. He was already 30 years old this year. He was Ji Tingxiao, Ji Jinzi's elder brother. Glancing at Yeching Cheng and Yunting calmly, he said calmly, "Your Highness, Princess, just came back today." Yes, Yeching Cheng nodded, "Thank you for your hard work during this time." "Responsibilities are not to mention hard work," Ji Tingxiao said, "but since Yunting has returned, it is best for the princess and him to discuss whether Ruier will continue to be taught by me when studying and practicing martial arts, or whether he will choose another master." "Why do we need to discuss it again?" Yeching Cheng smiled lightly. "Are you unwilling to cause Ruier this trouble again?" Ji Tingxiao's expression did not change, and his tone was always indifferent. "Ruier is Chen's student. Once a teacher, he will always be a father. As long as he is willing to admit it, I will always be his master. There will be no trouble." Yeching Cheng said, "I think so too. However, I have very strict requirements for teaching, and even more so for martial arts. I never hesitate to use corporal punishment to discipline him. The process of teaching and practicing martial arts is inevitably accompanied by pain," he said, his eyes naturally falling on Yun on the pavilion. "The next few years will be long, and the process may not be easy. You can think about it again." Yunting slowly let go of the child in his arms, calmed down the turbulent emotions in his heart, turned to Ji Tingxiao, with real gratitude in his eyes, and knelt down as soon as he bent his knees. "Brother Ji, thank you." A strong arm supported his body in time, and Ji Tingxiao said in a steady tone, "There's no need to do this." Yunting suppressed his emotions, stood up straight slowly, and said, "Thank you." "Just come back," Ji Tingxiao said calmly. "Ruier will stay with me for now. You can do whatever you want. If you need help, just ask. I am in charge of the Ji family now." Yunting was silent for a moment. "Will Ruier being here bring you trouble?" "No," Ji Jinzi said quickly. "Yunting, don't worry, Ruier has been staying at my house for 2 years, and my eldest brother has been teaching. Apart from me and eldest brother, no third person has ever come into the study." "Pass." Yeching Cheng raised his eyebrows. "I'm not a human." Ji Jinzi paused and changed his words calmly, "Except for a few of us, no one else has been here." Yunting couldn't help but say thank you again. He didn't know where to start with 1,000 words. Probably only these 2 words could express his gratitude at this time. "Okay, don't think so much," Yeching Cheng said calmly. "Tingxiao is not a person who is afraid of trouble. I know that, so I dare to hand Ruier over to him. But you also heard what Tingxiao said just now. How about decide to think about it yourself?" Yunting lowered his head and looked at Ruier. "Ruier, are you afraid of hardship?" "Don't be afraid." Ruier shook his head. The little child could already understand the conversation of adults. A man can only become a master by enduring hardships. Master is doing it for my own good. Ruier likes master and wants to be master's student. Yunting touched his head. "Be good." Ruier was a little cautious and said, "Second uncle. Is something really wrong with the prince?" Ji Jinzi turned to look at Yeching Cheng. "Is it impossible to come back?" Yeching Cheng said calmly, "Why come back?" "To be the emperor." Ji Jinzi was silent and immediately understood what she meant. Yan can no longer come back, and the court of Shu is about to face some turmoil. The emperor is ill and his spirit is getting worse and worse than before. The princes will definitely take this opportunity to speed up their fight for power. In this kind of situation, at that time, no one would still hold the cautious attitude of Su Tuzi, because time no longer allowed. They would desperately disrupt the situation of the DPRK, win over all the ministers of the DPRK and China who could be attracted, and use all means to attack their opponents and kill them. And since Yunting came back with Ye Cheng at this time, it means that he is ready for revenge. Ji Jinzi pondered for a moment and said calmly, "The commander of the imperial guards in the palace is King Mu's confidant. The princess can start with him." Ye Cheng thought of the fact that King Mu had just sent someone to invite her to pick up the Fengzikan banquet, and the corners of his lips smacked softly. I know among the Shu royal family, except for the Prince Ye Yan, King Mu had the greatest chance of successfully competing for the heir apparent, but Ye Cheng would not let that happen. He succeeds. After the words fell, the study fell into a brief silence. Ruier Ye Cheng reached out and touched Ruier's head. "You study hard and practice martial arts. Your second uncle and I will come to see you tomorrow." Ruier nodded obediently. Yunting looked at Ruier reluctantly, then turned around and left the secret passage with Ye Cheng. Ji Jinzi entered the secret passage with them, and after closing the door, he said lightly, "Ruier is young, and his hatred for his parents' death is not as strong as his elder brother. In addition, his elder brother has been strict with him in the past 2 years, and he has devoted all his attention to studying and practicing martial arts. Ruier is stronger and more mature than children of the same age. At a young age, he has some of the style of elder brother Yun, and he will become a great man in the future." Determined to become a great man? Yunting was silent. He didn't have much expectation for Ruier, but just hoped that he could grow up safely. Becoming a great man does not necessarily mean luck. Defending the country and serving the king loyally, but in the end, his family was broken up because of the king's suspicion. Such a great man is better off not having it. "Have you been doing well these past 2 years? Ji Jinzi stared at Yunting's elegant and handsome profile. "There has been no news, and I thought you." "I'm fine." Yunting smiled faintly. "It's just that there are some unavoidable reasons, so I couldn't pass on the news to you." Ji Jinzi nodded, and didn't ask any more questions. "Be careful, don't fall into the trap." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 243. After closing the secret door of the study, Ji Jinzi turned around and walked back. Ye Cheng and Yunting walked out of the study and returned to King Yun Hall. The maid made tea for them and quickly left. There is no need to instill the hatred of adults into children. I think it is better for Ruier to grow up healthily. Ye Cheng sat on the low couch in front of the screen, holding a teacup in his hand, and said in a calm tone, although he should understand something in his heart, the child has nothing to do with it. Adults are different. As long as you give him a normal and healthy environment, the hatred and pain will fade over time and will not take root in your heart. Yunting sat opposite her and was silent for a moment. Jinji is an official in the court. Yes. Ye Cheng nodded. Currently, I am training in the Ministry of Civil Affairs. My official position is not big and I am not in the limelight. The 2 brothers of the Ji family hold one civil and one military position in the government, but in fact they are both civil and military. In particular, Ji Tingxiao, the eldest son of Ji, is calm and distant, and his temperament is rigorous and self-disciplined to the point of perfection. His rigorous self-discipline is not only reflected in his words and deeds. And the same is true for his younger brother. Whenever Ji Jinzi did something he shouldn't have done outside, a family meal was usually unavoidable, so he asked Ye Cheng and Yunting to think carefully about it. If Ruier really became his direct student, he would not only gain knowledge and martial arts in the future, you have to endure hardships in school, and your etiquette and behavior will be subject to strict discipline. Fortunately, both Yunting and Ye Cheng understood his temper and what it meant for Ruier to be his disciple. He would endure unbearable hardships and unbearable sins, but the children he taught would definitely become upright men. Moreover, Ji Tingxiao is a very defensive person. No matter how big a mistake his people make or how much trouble they cause, he is usually the only one who can teach him a lesson, and no one else can do anything about it. With Ruier staying in his hands, Yunting and Yeqing Cheng were relieved. Although the Jinlin guards are not as numerous as the Imperial Guards and have different responsibilities from the Imperial Guards, they are 10 times stronger than the Imperial Guards. Yeqing Cheng said, Ji Tingxiao is in charge of the Golden Lin Guards. There is no need to get involved for the time being. When necessary, the Jinlin Guards can play a key role. Yunting frowned. I am very grateful to him for helping me take care of Ruier. I don't want to involve the Ji family in the matter of revenge. What are you thinking about? Yeqing Cheng glanced at him, a cold smile appeared on the corners of his lips. Revenge is great, but do you think revenge is the only important thing now? Yunting said nothing. The royal family is in turmoil, and no one can avoid wading into troubled waters. Yeqing Cheng took a sip of tea, and said in a neither salty nor light tone, your enemy is the royal family, not ordinary people, nor a certain aristocratic family. If something happens to the royal family, it will matter. What matters is the common people in the world and the country of Shu. No one in the civil and military dynasties can stay away from it. Yunting was silent for a moment, his brows filled with deep thought. A change of dynasty. Yeqing Cheng raised his eyebrows. Isn't that what you planned? No. Yunting shook his head. I think you can be the queen. Yeqing Cheng was stunned. How can you tell that I am interested in the throne? The regent and princess can go to Dongling and become the queen, and I think you can too. Yunting pursed her lips, and her voice was obviously more eager to try. What do you think? Do you want to be a royal husband? Royal husband? Yunting was startled and shook his head subconsciously. I have no such idea. Yeqing Cheng narrowed his eyes. Don't you have this idea? Yunting was a little puzzled. Come here. Yeqing Cheng put down the teacup and hooked his fingers at him. The smile on his lips made people feel numb. Yunting paused for a moment, then put down the teacup and stood up and walked to her. Yeqing Cheng's posture and expression at this time indeed looked like a queen. She made a gesture, and Yunting obediently squatted down in front of her. With a slight smile on her lips, she looked straight into her eyes. What's wrong? You want me to be the queen, but you don't want to be the emperor's husband. Yeqing Cheng's lips raised a cold arc. Then who do you think is more suitable to be the emperor's husband? Yunting was stunned, and then he realized what the problem was, and he was immediately annoyed at his stupidity. That's not what I meant. He stretched out his hand to hold Yeqing Cheng's hand and quickly said, actually, what I really want to do is to take revenge and travel around the world with you. But the royal family of Shu deserves to die, but the people are innocent, so. A country cannot live without a king for a day, so you changed your mind and wanted me to be the queen, but you never thought about who would be the emperor's husband. Yunting nodded obediently, with a very submissive attitude, but after thinking about it carefully, I think there is nothing good about being a queen. What's wrong? Yunting sighed, stood up and picked her up, sat on the low couch, and then surrounded her whole body in his arms. I don't like you surrounded by too many men, even a minister will let her. I'm jealous, and I can't bear to let you face the boring and complicated government affairs every day, and I don't want you to be surrounded by a bunch of conspiracies all the time. After a pause, he concluded, being a queen is too tiring, so let's forget it. Just pretend I didn't say it. Yeqing Cheng hooked his neck and squinted. It's rare to hear you say something nice. If you like to hear it, I can talk to you more often in the future. Yunting kissed her face and said in a gentle voice, I'm all yours now. I'll do whatever you ask me to do. The smile on Yeqing Cheng's lips became more pleasant. This is so good. Yunting also had a smile on his face. I haven't been in a good mood these past 2 days. Thank you for tolerating me. Don't always send me off with a dry thank you. Yeqing Cheng lifted his chin, as if he were a prostitute teasing a young girl. If you really want to thank me, why not pledge yourself to me? Yunting's smile deepened. I couldn't ask for more. Then it's better to do it tonight, Ye Cheng said. Stay in this palace and serve me. Serve me? Yunting's smile froze, and then he looked at her uncertainly. Are you serious? Ye Cheng said, do you think I'm kidding you? Yunting hesitated for a moment, but I'm not ready yet, don't get me wrong, he said he was not mentally prepared. What are you going to prepare? Ye Cheng frowned, her eyes a little strange. Isn't it just bathing and changing clothes, and then making love? Do you want me to find a nanny to teach you, or give you 2 Spring Palace manuals to read? Yunting's handsome face blushed. Teach nanny? Spring Palace manual? He really wanted to know why she could say such words so calmly. Ye Cheng stood up and walked towards the inner hall. If you are a man, don't hesitate, like an unmarried girl, obey me tonight, and walk sideways in the imperial capital in the future. Yunting sat on the low couch, not knowing how to react for a long time. He remembered that Ye Cheng was not so tough 3 years ago. Could it be that he was just too shy? The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 244. Ye Cheng's attitude towards the matter of sleeping with her was absolutely serious, and she would do what she said. No matter whether Yunting was a gentleman or coy, she would treat it as invisible, just like a madam who forced a good girl into prostitution in a brothel and would not force him. Never give up until you abandon your weapons and surrender. In her words, idleness is idleness, why not find something pleasant to do? So she forced Yunting to bathe with her, and unscrupulously looked at his body from top to bottom. When she saw the light marks all over his chest and back, her eyes darkened, but she said nothing. Quietly splashing water to cleanse oneself. The 3 years of separation were torture for her, and for Yunting, they were almost depressing to the point of madness. She didn't know how he survived those 3 years, and she couldn't participate in his more than 1,000 difficult days. But as of today, all the suffering and pain will be faded along with the scars on his body. And slowly fade. In their future lives, in addition to joining hands in revenge, they will also use love to heal the scars in each other's hearts. Yunting walked into the bathtub, and the water surface with various fresh petals floating on it rippled, spreading out layer by layer, and the petals exuded a refreshing fragrance. Half leaning against the bathtub, a long and thin figure is looming in the water. Her skin is fair and her back is smooth. She has the fitness of a martial arts practitioner and the whiteness and delicateness she developed after being frail and taking medication during those years. It is perfect and impeccable. Even the messy scars from 3 years ago have actually faded under the influence of drugs, leaving only a few faint traces. Through these traces, one can see the injuries suffered before, but it does not make people feel sad. Feeling unwell. Ye Cheng looked at it with a calm look in his eyes, but said nothing. He lowered his eyes and concentrated on taking the water to purify himself. After a stick of incense, Ye Cheng stood up and walked out of the bath, wiped his body slowly, and then raised his eyes to look at Yunting. Has it been washed? Yunting suddenly came back to his senses and looked up to see Ye Cheng, who had put on a cloud-colored light silk dress. Her exquisite body was looming under the light silk dress, and her pair of slender white legs. Yunting looked away in panic, his cheeks felt hot, but he heard Ye Cheng's bewitching voice ringing in his ears. Do you need me to wait for you? Yunting calmed down and cursed himself for being useless. After all, he is a man, how can he be frightened by a woman so much that he blushes and his heart beats? Hurry up! Ye Cheng, with her bare feet, turned around and walked to the side of the imperial concubine's couch to lie down. After washing, take me out. Yunting didn't have time to think about it. He washed himself hurriedly, got out of the bath, wiped himself, and put on the pajamas that Ye Cheng had prepared for him. Then he turned to look at the woman lying on the couch with her eyes closed, and slowly raised her feet. He walked over, his steps as stiff as a prisoner going to the execution ground. Walking to the imperial concubine's bed, Yunting pursed her thin lips, picked her up stiffly, turned around and walked towards the bed in the inner hall. Yeching Cheng was hugged by him, but she could still stretch out her delicate hands to lift his chin. She quietly looked at his face, which was so red that it seemed to be bleeding, and his teeth that were involuntarily clenched when he was nervous. He couldn't help but chuckle. "You afraid of me?" "I." Yeching Cheng looked at him with a smile. "Can I eat people?" Yunting shook his head. "I think your reaction at this time is particularly like that of a young girl on the first day she was sold into a brothel." Yeching Cheng curled her lips in an interesting way. "I am the madam who gave birth to a vicious heart." "You are a benefactor." Yunting felt as if his voice was floating. This annoying little goblin almost made him lose his mind. Not the madam. Benefactor. Yekingchen's smile deepened. "Then do I still have to pay you money?" "No need." Yunting shook his head slowly and put her on the soft bed. "I am willing to commit myself to you." Yeching Cheng burst into laughter. She was really curious. How on earth could he say such delicate words with a face so red that it looked like he was about to spit out fire? Yunting's calmness did not last long. Under Yekingchen's strong request, he quickly undressed and lay on the bed, kissed her face, and couldn't restrain his emotion. Ching Cheng. When they were young, they had lied side by side on the bed. At that time, the boy was wild and full of energy. At that time, the girl's face was alluring, which made his heart flutter. But considering her age, he could always make his heart calm. Unexpectedly, now as they get older, they become more. It was like there was an invisible barrier. She moved the barrier away domineeringly and forcefully, creating a step for his hatred-filled heart and face that he couldn't let go of. Wushan Yunyu is a natural thing for lovers. The clothes fell to the ground, and the temperature in the dormitory rose. Yunting looked at the woman in front of him who had made him miss him for 3 years in Kangyun Mountain. He took a deep breath, lowered his head, and kissed her delicate red lips gently. A charming room. After the clouds and rain passed, Yeching Chen nestled in Yunting's arms, running her slender fingers across the light scar marks on his shoulders and chest, and said in a calm voice, "There are some things I have never asked you, and it seems that you have no intention of taking the initiative to tell me." Yunting was full and satisfied, and his body was at its most relaxed. He had no idea that Yeching Chen would bring up such a topic at this beautiful moment, so he couldn't help but be silent for a moment. "They said it was a fish from the Phoenix tribe that slipped through the net." Yeching Chen narrowed his eyes. "They said." Yeching Chen kept rubbing circles on his heart. "You didn't check?" "No." Yunting grabbed her hand that started the fire recklessly. "Juxiao Pavilion has rules and regulations, and I haven't interfered with the affairs of Shu in the past 3 years. Why? My lord used to be aloof and cold-tempered, and he was not easy to get close to." "I cannot violate the rules," he said. Yunting said calmly, "Now that I have entered Juxiao Pavilion, I should naturally only obey the orders of the master of Juxiao Pavilion." "I do understand why he didn't let you investigate," Yeching Cheng said casually. "You have scars all over your body is weak and endangered, and your mind is full of hatred. In this situation, if you are not restrained by rules, the consequences will be disastrous." Yes. Yunting nodded and tried his best to remain calm. "There are many experts in Juxiao Pavilion. I spent almost the first half of the year in Kangyun Mountain recuperating from my injuries. Thanks to the wealth of Juxiao Pavilion, I could withstand the drinking I did. More tonics and buckets of expensive medicinal baths saved this miserable life." Yeching Cheng frowned, but didn't say anything. In addition to healing injuries, those medicinal baths can also slowly remove the toxins from the body that have been suffering from internal injuries for a long time and open up the meridians. Yunting smiled lightly. "Then I started to practice martial arts with those masters. Kang, there are many masters in Yunchen who are my masters. They teach very seriously and teach almost everything they have." Yeching Cheng said, "You have some martial arts skills and can learn quickly." coupled with the potential inspired by extreme hatred, I dare not say that 2 years can equal 20 years. It can at least absorb 7 or 8 years of ordinary people's cultivation. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article feed, placement, below article feed, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 245. Yunding hummed, and his voice became quieter. Who saved my life? I remember it very clearly. After taking revenge, I will still go back to Juxiao Pavilion in the future. Yeching Cheng said calmly, I didn't say I wouldn't let you go back. Yunding was silent. There is nothing to miss here in the kingdom of Shu. I am annoyed when I see those people, she said lightly. Juxiao Pavilion is the real invisible overlord in the world. If I stay in Juxiao Pavilion for the rest of my life, I can feel free and unrestrained. The magical days. Yunding said, what do you think about the Phoenix tribe? I have no idea, Yeching Cheng said calmly. Even if the Feng clan really slips through the net, there is no reason to attack you, so the most likely possibility is that someone deliberately pretends to be an orphan of the Feng clan. Have. Yeching Cheng paused and looked at him in confusion. What? He had a reason to treat me like this, Yunding said. When the emperor ordered the conquest of the Feng tribe, my father was also one of the generals who led the army. Yeching Cheng frowned. She knew this, but when the Feng tribe was destroyed more than 10 years ago, General Yun was not the highest-ranking general in the Shu kingdom. His immediate superior was the biggest accomplice in leading troops to annihilate the Feng tribe, but no matter whether he is an accomplice or an accomplice, the biggest mastermind is the emperor. Who dares to disobey an imperial edict? Even if it were another general, the most he could do would be to argue with reason. If the emperor had made up his mind, no one would dare to resist. Let's investigate this matter slowly, Yeching Cheng said calmly. Didn't Rong you say that you can use the power of Juxiao Pavilion as you like? With Juxiao Pavilion here, there is nothing that cannot be found out. Yunding hummed and said nothing more. How does it feel? Yunding's thinking was slow for a moment, and when he looked at Yeching Chen's clear and interesting eyes, he realized what she was talking about. The heat that had just subsided on his face swept over him again. He pursed his thin lips slightly and tried to maintain a calm expression. Fine. Fine. Yeching Cheng raised her lips and smiled softly. She felt that she might have some bad taste. Seeing this person's shy expression actually made her feel a burst of joy, and all the haze in her heart had long since disappeared. How long has it been since you felt so relaxed? Yeching Cheng turned over in a good mood and said lightly, my back hurts, please help me press it. When Yunding thought about the cause of her sore waist and back pain, the corners of his lips could not help but curl up. He responded softly, straightened up, and carefully squeezed her shoulders and lower back. Yunding's eyes narrowed, but his heart gradually became gloomy. Ching Cheng, he spoke with a soft voice. You, why are you so nice to me? Yeching Cheng was silent for a moment, because you are a ray of sunshine in my dark life. Yunding is silent. Sunshine in life? No. It should be said that she was the most precious light in his life. Without her, the rest of his life after revenge would have been hopeless. The lights are flickering and the night is getting darker. On the first night after returning to the imperial capital, Yeching Cheng domineeringly and forcefully made this person his own, and he could no longer escape. With eyes still sleepy, Yeching Cheng said vaguely, it's getting late, go to sleep. Yunding hummed, lay down next to her, reached out and pulled her whole body into his arms. Early the next morning, as soon as they got up, they heard a report from the guards outside. Your Highness, the Queen has sent someone to ask you to come into the palace immediately. Enter the palace immediately? A trace of ridicule flashed across Yeqingqing's lips, and he said casually, "No matter who comes to invite, let him wait first. I have to change clothes, wash up, and dress up." Yes. In the inner hall, Yunting is dressed in jade white brocade clothes, looking handsome and graceful as jade. Yeqingqing tied the belt for him personally and said calmly, "This face should be slightly disguised. I should go to the banquet tonight." Yunting pondered, "Should I go with you? I wanted you to stay here for a few days before, but now I have changed my mind." Yeqingqing smiled lightly, "If I take you out to dry out, those thoughtful people will still guess your identity. Just guessing is not enough. I have to send someone to investigate. It won't hurt to let them spread their energy." Yunting said, "You want to go into the palace to see the queen?" "Well, of course I want to see her." Yeqingqing curled his lips, his eyebrows were cold. "If I don't go to see her, how will I know that she is as anxious and unbearable as an ant on a hot pot at this time?" Yunting nodded and explained, "Don't drink tea when you enter the palace, don't eat anything given to you, don't fall into their plot. They can't plot against me." Yeqingqing turned around and walked to the dressing table and sat down. Yunting followed him, and this time he took the initiative to draw her eyebrows without waiting for her instructions. "I want to enter the palace with you." "You'd better not go for now," Yeqingqing said in a calm tone. "If you can't make a move when you see your enemy, you will suffer a lot of torture for nothing." Yunting shook his head slowly and smiled, "Don't worry, just like you said, I have survived 3 years. I don't care about these 2 days. I just treat them as bugs in the ditch and just don't look at them twice." Yeqingqing thought for a moment and shook his head, "Men are not allowed to enter the harem. If you go in with me, you have to dress up as a woman. With your figure." Looking up and down Yunting's slender body, "How do you look like a woman in your body?" Yunting was speechless. "It's quite similar when she's innocent and shy." Yunting listened to her teasing and sighed softly, seeming helpless. "I told you before that I was not ready, but you are making fun of me. If I really bully you, I'm afraid someone will I have to cry and beg for mercy." As the words fell, the air seemed to be quiet for a moment. It was eerily quiet. Crying and begging for mercy, Yeqingqing raised his eyes. His phoenix eyes seemed to be smiling but not smiling, with a hint of provocation. "Are you talking about me?" Yunting nodded calmly and elegantly, "Do I dare to tell others?" "You are quite confident." Yunting considered the words. Although the term "dog jumps over the wall" is not nice, but since dogs will jump over the wall when they are in a hurry, I am a tall and upright man who has been teased by you again and again, so I have to save my face, right? Yeqingqing confirmed, "Get it back on the bed." Yunting said, "You don't believe it?" Yeqingqing's tone was very calm, "You can try it." "In that case, it's a deal," Yunting said for a rare moment. "Set a date." "Do you still need to deliberately choose a date for this kind of thing?" Yeqingqing smiled calmly, "Just tonight." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 246. The ninth princess used to be aloof. Her mother died early, and there were many princesses in the royal family. The queen and the concubines in the harem were obsessed with palace fighting, and their eyes only saw the dragon throne where the emperor sat. Although they were not overly enthusiastic about the ninth princess, they had no time to deliberately cause trouble for her, so they rarely interacted with her. But this trip to the Great Zhou to form a marriage alliance failed. After returning, Yeqingqing instantly became a hot figure in the palace. The queen summoned her, the princes also wanted to see her, and the concubines in the harem secretly sent people to keep a close eye on her movements. Yeqingqing pretended not to know. After washing and dressing up, she followed the eunuch sent by the queen into the palace. As soon as she reached the palace gate, she met the eldest prince coming out of the palace. The two looked at each other, and the air was quiet for a moment. Ninth sister Prince Mu was the first to speak and break the silence, accompanied by a faint smile. Last night, I was inconsiderate and neglected the fatigue of ninth sister after a long journey. I will hold a banquet in my mansion tonight to welcome ninth sister. I wonder if ninth sister is free. Yeching Cheng smiled faintly. Okay. When Prince Mu heard her straightforward response, the gloom he felt after being rejected last night instantly dissipated, and a happy smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. I will ask Yuan to prepare well. Yeching Chen nodded. In this case, I will trouble my brother and sister-in-law. I will go to the palace to pay my respects to the queen first, and I will not accompany my brother to say more. Well, ninth sister, go ahead, we will see you in the evening, Prince Mu said, and suddenly seemed to remember something. By the way, I heard that ninth sister brought back a young man. Is he ninth sister's friend? Ninth sister can bring him tonight so that everyone can get to know him. Yeching Cheng smiled faintly. This eldest brother was not so kind to her before, but now he always called her ninth sister, and it really sounded like a brother and sister, as if they had a deep relationship. As for bringing back a man, not to mention that men and women should not be intimate with each other, according to the rules of the royal family, it is against the rules for a princess to be close to a man, and she brought him back to the palace openly. If it were in the past, I am afraid that these royal brothers would have reprimanded her. As expected, people are driven by interests. No principle or bottom line is worth mentioning in front of interests. What does it matter if it is against the rules? After her father ascended the throne, the Queen Mother also became the most noble woman in the world. However, the extreme wealth could no longer satisfy her desires. From the initial cover-up to the later blatant, the Queen Mother's palace had no less than 10 male favorites, and the princes and ministers did not dare to say anything. Yeching Chen walked into the palace and followed the eunuch to the Queen's palace. This woman, who was the mother of the country, looked much more haggard than before Yeching Chen went to the Great Zhou to marry. The majesty that was once high above had faded a lot. Even with her gorgeous dress, she could not hide the pale fatigue visible between her eyebrows. Yeching Chen walked into the palace and bowed slightly. Empress. The queen frowned, as if she was dissatisfied with her rudeness, but her dissatisfaction was only for a moment, and she quickly said, "Please sit down." The palace servant heard the words and immediately moved a chair to the side of Yeching Chen. Yeching Chen was not polite, brushed her skirt and sat down. I wonder why the queen asked me to come here. The etiquette in the palace has always been a decoration for her. She didn't care about it before, and now she doesn't care about it anymore. The queen said, "I want to ask about the prince." Oh, Yeching Chen lowered her eyes and looked at her robe sleeves, and said casually, "I don't know much about the prince's brother for the time being." Not very clear. The queen's expression changed, and her face darkened instantly. "Didn't the prince go to Dezhou with you? Why don't you know about his situation?" "Because the marriage didn't succeed." Yeching Chen smiled lightly and looked up at the queen, who was dressed gorgeously. "I originally wanted to come back with the prince, but he didn't agree and asked me to stay in Dezhou. Later, I heard that the prince had an accident when he left Dezhou and entered the border of Shu. I was very anxious when I heard the news, so I asked the regent of Dezhou to let me come back. I reported this to my father as soon as I entered the palace last night." The queen's cheek twitched, and she restrained her anger and said lightly, "The prince asked you to stay in Dezhou because he had no choice. Family and national affairs cannot be trifled with. He must follow the will of your father." Yeching Chen smiled playfully. "I didn't say he did anything wrong." The queen paused. "Didn't the regent of the Great Zhou investigate the disappearance of the prince?" "We did, but we didn't find any definite news," Yeching Chen said. "The clues point to the martial arts world. As for which force is responsible, we can only wait and see." The queen's tone was a little anxious. "Waiting for what?" Waiting to see what the other party's purpose is in kidnapping the prince, Ye Cheng said calmly, there must be a reason for kidnapping. Whether the other party is seeking money or something else, we don't know yet, we can only wait. The queen picked up the teacup to hide her uneasiness. Why doesn't the great Zhou agree to the marriage? Ye Cheng raised the corner of her lips slightly, as if mocking, they have no intention of marriage, not to mention that Shu Kingdom has increased its troops at the border and made blatant threats. The regent of the great Zhou doesn't buy it? The queen looked at her, and she couldn't understand who she got this kind of temperament from. She was born with a rebellious nature, and people couldn't like her anyway. What did your father say when I met him last night? The queen can ask the father in person, Ye Cheng said. The disappearance of the crown prince concerns the country, and the father must have some plans in mind, but I am just a princess, I don't care about politics, nor do I care about the ownership of the country. The queen's expression was gloomy, and she tentatively said, if you know the whereabouts of the crown prince. The queen thinks too highly of me. Ye Cheng smiled faintly, I am a weak woman, how can I know so many inside stories? Besides, when the prince disappeared, I was still living in the regent palace of the great Zhou dynasty. Even if I had the ability to reach the sky, I could not know the secret of the prince's disappearance. The queen remained silent. Father's health is not as good as before. If the prince can't be found again, the ministers will most likely persuade the emperor to appoint another crown prince. The queen had better be mentally prepared. Ye Cheng stood up, her beautiful eyebrows calm, the prince's life and death are unknown at the moment. If another prince becomes the crown prince and inherits the throne, the queen's fate is probably predictable. Instead of doing this, it is better to give it a try and let the uncle-in-law send more people to search. The queen tightened her hand holding the teacup. Ye Cheng bowed, son, I'll take my leave. After saying this, she turned around and walked out. The queen did not stop her, but just looked at her back in silence. Ye Cheng clearly did not reveal much information to her, whether she really did not know or pretended not to know, the result was the same. But what she said was not without reason. The emperor's dragon body was getting weaker and weaker. If there was no news about the prince, he would definitely consider appointing another crown prince. At that time, she, the queen, would not have a good ending. So the most urgent task was to send someone to find the prince. Although it was a taboo to mobilize troops without authorization, she could not care so much. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 247. In the 2 days after the Double Ninth Festival, the court of Shu was tense, and the Great Zhou was no exception. However, compared with the panic caused by the disappearance of the prince in Shu, the Great Zhou had a regent, who could always stabilize the hearts of the court officials, the army, and the people. However, something the regent just announced recently made the court officials confused. Yun Wang is the regent. When this news came out, all the civil and military officials in the court were in a state of confusion. Standing among the officials, Yun Wang stared blankly at Rong Yu, who was indifferent and majestic in front of him, and had no idea what happened. He must have heard it wrong? Yes, he must have had an auditory hallucination just now. How could it be possible for him to be the regent? Regent the virtuous king looked at Rong Yu in confusion and asked in a tone of confirmation, let Prince Yun be the regent. The princess has to go back to Dongling, and I need to escort her there. Rong Yu sat on the dragon chair, his tone indifferent and distant, while I am away from Dezhou, Prince Yun will be the regent. Ling Ling will still be in charge of the imperial guards inside and outside the palace, and will follow Prince Yun's orders during his regency, and must not disobey in the slightest. Ling Ling bowed his head and said, I obey your orders. Prince Yun looked dazed, as if he was in a haze, not knowing what day it was. The wise king assists the government, and all the cabinet members need to fully assist the Yun king. Rong Yu's eyes turned slightly, the 6 ministries will continue to govern as usual. I don't want to hear anyone being lazy. After returning from Dongling, I will adjust the duties of all officials. The position of Prime Minister is currently vacant. Please work hard, the wise king. I will choose a suitable candidate as Prime Minister when I return. The wise king was silent for a moment, bowed his head and said, I obey your order. When he said these 3 words, he couldn't help but wonder in his heart whether the regent wanted to support a puppet emperor again. Rather than saying that they assist the Yun king, it is better to say that the regent just wants the ministers to have someone sitting next to the dragon throne during the morning court, instead of just leaving an empty chair there. But the regent is not in the imperial capital. Even if the Yun king really regents the country, there should not be a formal morning court. So what is the point of letting the Yun king regent the country? Uncle, Prince Yun said timidly in a strange silence, I know nothing about government affairs, I'm afraid I can't do it. Do you allow me to bargain with you for my decision? Rong Yu said indifferently, and he shut up with one sentence. Prince Yun was startled and stopped talking instantly. This matter is settled. Rong Yu has always been taciturn and never said meaningless nonsense. I hope to see you do your best to do your job well. I will not treat all the ministers who are conscientious and dedicated. If someone acts recklessly during my absence from the Great Zhou, has thoughts that they shouldn't have, and does things that they shouldn't do, I will never show mercy. The civil and military officials in the court listened, all lowered their heads, and no one dared to question it. They just felt that the words spoken by the regent today seemed to have more emotions that were not in normal times, just like an old mother who was about to leave to tell her son. The indifferent tone had more threats and coaxing. The implication is that you all should behave better, be diligent and obedient, and I will reward you when I come back. If anyone dares to disobey, then the consequences will be borne by themselves. Well, it was probably their illusion. But letting Prince Yun govern the country, are you sure you are not joking? However, they clearly realized that when has the decision made by the regent been a joke? It is a done deal. Prince Ning and Prince Rui had their own thoughts, but they all thought that the reason why the regent let Prince Yun govern the country was probably because he had no power and no one around him, so he was easy to control and would not cause any trouble. As for whether he would establish himself as emperor or choose someone else as emperor after returning from Dongling, there has been no sign so far, and no one can guess what he is thinking. After the morning court, Rong Yu appointed 3 princes, Prince Yen, Prince Yun, and Prince Ning, as well as several cabinet ministers, 6 ministers, and Ling Ling, the commander of the imperial guards, to go to the imperial study. The other ministers all went out of the palace with a confused look on their faces. But after their thoughts slowly came back, they couldn't help but start thinking about several important issues. The regent king was going to escort the princess to Dongling. At the palace banquet before, the princess of Dongling said that the regent princess was the crown prince of Dongling. Was she going to inherit the throne when she returned to Dongling this time? What would the regent king do in the future? The ministers were considering the issue of the country and the people, and they were not too deeply concerned about the private affairs of their children. The obvious question in front of them was that the regent king and the princess were husband and wife. If the princess became the empress in Dongling, the regent king would not be able to return to Dazhu to be the emperor, right? Of course, with the regent king's proud and noble status, he would not stay in Dongling to marry into the family. In this case, would the couple have to be separated for a long time? Or, the princess might not inherit Dongling, but would go to Dongling, recognize her ancestors, and then return to Dazhu to continue to be her regent princess, and from then on, she would support her husband and raise her children in harmony. After all, Dongling has always been a male emperor, so how could they suddenly appoint a princess as the crown prince? Maybe the eldest princess of Dongling just said that on purpose to avenge Nanzingzi's betrayal to her. This possibility is very high. The ministers had their own thoughts and speculations in their hearts, but Rong Yu, who had caused a lot of trouble with his words, acted like nothing had happened. He explained some things to the princes and ministers in the imperial study, ordered Prince Yun to go back to the palace with him, and then summoned Wenling, Qilin, Lingfan, and other staff members into the study. Qilin will take care of the military camp, Ling will be in charge of the palace, and Lingfan will select 5,000 soldiers to follow me to Dongling. Rongyu ordered. Wenling will serve as a political advisor in the imperial study from tomorrow to assist Prince Yun. The regent's confidants were obviously more calm than the ministers. They didn't ask anything and just responded respectfully. Of course, the one who was confused was Prince Yun. He looked at the calm faces of Qilin, Lingfan, and Wenling and couldn't help but feel confused. Was he the only one who thought this was abnormal? Emperor, Uncle Prince Yun spoke carefully, I don't know anything, how can I be the regent? Rongyu looked at him expressionlessly, his tone cold, I have arranged so many people for you. If you can't help yourself, I don't mind teaching you in person when I come back. Personally, teach in person? Prince Yun shuddered. He felt as if a piece of gold suddenly fell from the sky and hit him on the forehead. Although gold was precious, it hurt. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 248. However, he turned to look at Wenling. The Wen family has been quiet since the incident involving Wen Lan. Taifa Wen resigned from his post and stayed at home. The Wen family's direct grandson also kept a low profile and kept quiet for a long time. Not much news has spread these days, and there are far fewer interactions with the children of powerful families who are similar in age to those in the imperial capital. Unexpectedly, the regent actually gave him a chance to revive his family at this time. In fact, King Yun has always admired this. The regent has always been fair and just in government affairs. Although Wen Yan's incident has had an impact on the Wen family, punishment is punishment. He will still give punishment to loyal and capable ministers. Chance. After all, Wenling's attitude after Wen Yan's accident was humble and respectful. His grandfather was a veteran of 3 dynasties and was highly respected. Apart from Wen Lan, the Wen family had not done anything out of the ordinary in these years. The imperial study room participates in politics. Although the official position is not large, it is the place closest to the center of power. If you follow the emperor, you will definitely become a close minister of the emperor in the future, and your official career will be limitless. Fortunately, King Yun knew in his heart that he was only a temporary minister, so he didn't need to think too much. Wenling would fulfill his duties, and he would try not to cause trouble to these auxiliary ministers who held real power. When the emperor's uncle waited, after returning from Dongling, he would soon be out of the sea of suffering. As for Wenling, who became the imperial study and participated in politics, he would deal with cabinet ministers for a period of time in the future. The regent should give him a chance to practice. As for how Wenling will seize this opportunity, that is his own business. King Yun thought about it and couldn't help but frown again, secretly wondering why the pie falling from the sky happened to him. Prince Qi, Prince Rui, and Prince Ning were all staring at the throne. Did the emperor really not know, or was he pretending not to know? That's all for today. Rongyush's cold and indifferent voice sounded, interrupting King Yun's drifting thoughts. Lingfan will go back to the military camp to select 5,000 elites and set off early the day after tomorrow. Lingfan accepted the order. Yes. Uncle Emperor, if there is nothing else, I will take my leave first. King Yun said respectfully, I will go and talk to those ministers first. After all, in the next few months, they will become colleagues who work together. Although they were colleagues originally, the situation will be different in the future, and they will become closer colleagues. Rongyu hummed, remember one sentence. Ah. King Yun lowered his eyebrows respectfully, Uncle, please give me your instructions. Plan your own affairs in your position. Rongyu said in a calm voice, don't let me catch you for your laziness in politics. otherwise you will definitely regret it. King Yun couldn't help but shuddered again. Yes, Chu Xiu will definitely follow the emperor's uncle's teachings and not dare to slack off. The piece of gold that fell from the sky was so heavy that it hurt his head. King Yun felt that his great freedom and years were gone forever. The emperor didn't know whether he wanted to promote him or punish him, but after thinking about it, he didn't do anything to make the emperor unhappy. After excusing himself and walking out of the study, King Yun looked up and saw the bright sunshine. The golden sun hung high above his head, which made him feel a little dizzy for a moment, as if he was stepping on colorful auspicious clouds, and he felt as if he was floating and not knowing where he was. After leaving the regent's uncle's sight, King Yun finally let out a long breath and raised his hand to touch the sweat on his forehead. Prince Yun, Nan 11 walked down the corridor and saw Prince Yun standing outside the study, and took the initiative to say hello. What's the matter? Do you want to see Rong Yu? King Yun raised his eyes and saw Nan 11, and bowed respectfully. See you, Auntie Huang. No need to be polite. Do you want to go in and see Rong Yu? No, King Yun said, I just came out of the study and have already met the emperor's uncle. Nan 11 snorted and stared at him with some interest for a moment. Your expression seems very distressed. King Yun glanced at her silently and thought to himself, with how much the emperor's uncle loved the emperor's aunt, he thought the emperor's aunt should know about letting him supervise the country, right? Although women are not allowed to participate in politics, the imperial aunt is not an ordinary person. Princess Dongling will inherit the country when she returns. Ahem, Auntie Huang, there is something. King Yun's expression was a little subtle. There is something I want to ask Auntie Huang. Nan 11 smiled slightly. You ask. King Yun frowned, wondering if it was his imagination. Looking at Nan 11's smile in front of him, he always felt like his scalp was numb. King Yun turned his head and glanced at the study room with the door closed, raised his hand and said, Auntie Huang, let's go and talk elsewhere. Nan 11 nodded and walked into the corridor with him, her steps calm and her expression calm. Auntie Huang, Prince Yun cleared his throat. Uncle Huang asked me to supervise the country. Supervisor, Nan 11 smiled softly. Rong Yu trusts you, you must not betray his trust. King Yun choked. No, Auntie Huang, I'm afraid I won't be able to do this job given by Uncle Huang. How could that be? Nan 11 tilted her head to look at him. I think Rong Yu still has a good eye for people. There must be something redeeming about you, otherwise he wouldn't make such a decision. King Yun choked. The emperor's aunt really trusts the emperor's uncle unconditionally. Okay, don't feel like the sky is about to fall when you are faced with a powerful enemy. Nan 11's smile faded and her tone became more serious. Didn't Rong Yu arrange an available assistant minister for you? King Yun was silent for a moment and said truthfully, actually, I am a little confused about your uncle's intentions, and I feel a little uneasy. Rong Yu will most likely stay in Dongling in the future, Nan 11 said calmly. The country cannot be without a king for a day, you should understand what he means. King Yun's face changed slightly, and he was speechless for a long time. The amount of information in Nan 11's words was too much, so much that he dared not think about it, but he couldn't help thinking about it. The Great Zhou needs an emperor who is dedicated to governing the country, and he thinks you are suitable. Nan 11 said, you don't have to be nervous, just listen to me first. King Yun looked at her hesitantly and nodded slowly. Please let the emperor tell you clearly, Aunt. Rong Yu has never had ambitions for the throne, but the countries surrounding the Great Zhou have been eyeing the fertile territory of the Great Zhou. You should know that whether it was the former northern frontier or the later Shu kingdom, when they invaded the surrounding passes of the Great Zhou, it was Rong Yu who defeated their troops and horses, causing them to lose soldiers and generals, and severely damaged their vitality, extinguishing their ambitions. Nan 11 smiled lightly. Rong Yu has been holding the military power because of the integrity of the Great Zhou territory. Looking at the Great Zhou, besides him, who else do you think can make the northern frontier Shu kingdom afraid? King Yun listened quietly and nodded when he heard this, and Huang is right, no one in the Great Zhou can match the emperor's uncle in using troops like a god and planning strategies. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 249. But the current emperor has always wanted to deal with him. Nan 11 smiled lightly. You should also know Rong Yu's temper. He has no ambition, but he cannot tolerate anyone's schemes. Rong Chuiyun doesn't think about government affairs before he is firmly established. He only thinks about plotting against loyal ministers and generals. Such a narrow-minded person is not worthy of being an emperor. King Yun was slightly frightened and did not dare to say anything casually. Although he had always thought that Rong Chuiyun was too narrow-minded, had no tolerance for others, and was not worthy of being the master of the world. When he stayed out of the situation, not only did he dare to think these words, but sometimes he even said them without hesitation. But now that he is in it, even if he understands many things in his heart, he can only keep them in his heart, because he can no longer be an outsider, and he can no longer hold the attitude that it has nothing to do with him. I understand, but I can no longer say it unscrupulously. The time when Rong Yu and I left Dazhu is the best time for you to cultivate your confidence and learn government affairs. The people Rong Yu has arranged for you are all reliable and loyal ministers. You can win over people's hearts and take power in your hands. You don't have to worry about arousing anyone's suspicion. Nan 11 said calmly, the country is guarded by Rong Yu, and foreign enemies cannot invade. You can put all your thoughts on government affairs. When you need the help of those elders and ministers, don't worry. Please lower yourself, ask for advice humbly, and listen to others' opinions. As long as you don't do anything harmful to the people of Zhou dynasty, Rong Yu will not interfere too much. King Yun was troubled, but when the right time comes, Rong Yu will announce his support for the new emperor when he returns from Dongling. Nan 11 smiled lightly, you can take your time step by step, don't worry, wait until you have loyal ministers and good generals available. Sooner or later, the military power in Rong Yu's hands will be given over to the heroic generals who can protect the surrounding area. It's just a matter of time. King Yun pursed his lips. He felt that the power was still in the hands of the regent, which made him feel safe. The courtiers of the great Zhou dynasty were in awe of the regent. The majesty of this young uncle in the hearts of everyone was definitely greater than that of the emperor, comparable to the soul of a country. With the regent around, the courtiers would be obedient and his royal brothers would be a little more at ease. King Yun frowned, raised his eyes to look at Nan 11, and couldn't help but ask the suspicion in his heart, is this considered a combination of kindness and power by the emperor's uncle and the emperor's aunt, both soft and hard, hitting them with a stick and then giving them a sweet date? The emperor's uncle is a cold and ruthless person. He has always been used to killing decisively and keeping his word. He is also used to being solemn and solemn. It is impossible to talk to him softly, but he is afraid that he will feel uneasy. The regent of the country has to be on tenterhooks. So he asked the gentle Auntie Huang to explain it to him to reassure him. Nan 11 chuckled, you are right to think so. Anyway, Rong Yu sincerely wants you to be the emperor, and I also think you are more suitable. King Yun's tone was subtle, then I really have to thank the emperor's uncle and the emperor's aunt for their love. The country that others dreamed about so lightly fell on my head. It made me dizzy for a while. It still feels like a dream. So what do you think? King Yun was silent for a moment and said in a serious tone, I have never thought about this before. I don't want to participate in those intrigues and fights for power, and I don't want to be worried about being plotted day and night, so I have never stayed out of it. But since the emperor's uncle and the emperor's aunt trust me, I won't refuse pretentiously. After a pause, he looked up at the blue sky, instead of watching Dasu fall into civil strife again, I can only take over the important task without hesitation, so that the emperor can rest assured, and I also look forward to returning Dasu to a peaceful and stable society soon. Nan 11 snorted, it seems quite aggrieved. I'm not wronged, King Yun sighed, on the contrary, I should thank your uncle for trusting me. Although he is now alone, with no power or influence, no party members and staff, and no confidants who can be completely trusted, but since Rong Yu thinks that he is feasible, then he should not have to worry about anything that follows. He does not need confidants, only loyal ones. Civil servants and generals. This time as the supervisor and regent was an opportunity for him to gain experience. He still had a lot to learn. What won people over was not bribery, but convincing words and deeds. Although he is not good at intrigues, he can roughly understand what he should do in the future by understanding Rong Yu's temperament. After thinking about this, King Yun slowly relieved some of the pressure in his heart and said sincerely, I will try my best not to disappoint the emperor's uncle and the emperor's aunt. Nan 11 smiled and said, Rong Yu and I believe in you. King Yun resigned and left with complicated emotions. Nan 11 stood in the corridor and looked at the scenery. She was more than 3 months pregnant and had not yet begun to show her pregnancy. Her figure was still slender and slender. Her beautiful and delicate face was a little more calm and composed than before she was married, and there was a kind of saying. Even Yin Yu and Qing Yang sometimes felt that the grace between the princess's eyebrows and eyes was so awe-inspiring that people couldn't help but be impressed by her. Being pulled into a warm embrace, Nan 11 tilted her head and looked at Rong Yu tenderly, are you done talking? Rong Yu hummed, lowered his head and kissed her cheek. Prince Yun is a smart man, Nan 11 smiled lightly, he understands everything in his heart and his brain is better than those princes. It should not be a wrong decision to hand over the country to him. Rong Yu spoke softly, you won't leave it to our son. Nan 11 shook her head, women are fickle. Rong Yu hugged her quietly, silent, his eyebrows filled with a somewhat unpredictable color. Rong Yu, are you nervous? Nan 11 said softly, Juxiao Pavilion is very powerful, so you should be familiar with the Dongling Dynasty Bureau. Rong Yu said, don't be nervous, don't think too much. Nan 11's eyebrows moved slightly, if you have any thoughts or emotions in your heart, you must tell me in time. There is nothing that cannot be said between husband and wife. Yes, Rong Yu nodded, I know. Nan 11 glanced at him and always felt that his mood was a little abnormal these 2 days. It didn't seem like he was nervous, but he obviously looked worried. Was it the matter of going to Dongling that made him feel uneasy? For a person with such a strong and firm mind, what could easily affect his emotions? Nan 11 wanted to know, but Rong Yu hid it too deeply and always told her not to worry. If she proposed to stay in Dezhou and not go to Dongling, he would comfort her with broad words, so that Nan 11 always couldn't help but think in her heart, what exactly would she face when she went to Dongling this time? Yet Xing Cheng reminded her before that she should not be easily provoked by others. Who is this person who is likely to provoke their relationship? Someone from the royal family of Dongling? Nan 11 sighed softly and put her arms around his thin waist, Rong Yu, no matter what happens in the future, I will always be with you and never leave you. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 250. The reception banquet set by the shogunate for the 9th princess was quite grand. The princess personally hosted it. All the guests invited were royal family members, concubines, princesses, and princesses, all of whom were of high status. The prince's disappearance was still unknown, and the emperor's body was in poor health. At this juncture, the shogunate's palace dared to throw a banquet, and their thoughts could no longer be concealed. The princes were upset because they could not invite Yeching Cheng in time to let King Mu get there first, and they had to come to support him. A scene. Men have always been superior to women in the Shu kingdom, and the emperors have many heirs. The biggest role of royal princesses seems to be for marriage. 6 years ago, a princess of the Shu kingdom married to northern Xinjiang, and 4 years ago, another princess married the Yan next door. In other countries, princess marriages are not only for the sake of alliance, but sometimes also to appease the hearts of neighboring allied countries and make them feel at ease to rely on them. Therefore, the princes are trying their best to achieve the throne, and in their eyes, sisters may be just a tool for marriage or to win over courtiers. It is rare for a princess to make such a fuss and make such a fuss about getting married to the princess. However, everyone who attended the banquet tonight did not find it strange at all. Instead, they all rushed to see the ninth princess. Yet Chen was non-committal about this. In the evening, the carriage stopped outside the gate of Prince Mu's mansion. Yet Chen, who was dressed in a cloud-colored waistband dress, walked out of the carriage. She was tall and slender, with elegant and delicate eyebrows. A plum blossom-shaped red flower between her eyebrows made her pretty face even more unparalleled and dazzling. There is a sense of thrilling dignity and unattainability in the trance. After getting off the carriage, she raised her head slightly and glanced at the plaque of Prince Mu's mansion. The servants of Prince Mu's mansion were coming out to greet them, but she saw the carriage curtain was opened again, and a gentle young man as gentle as jade bent down and walked out of the carriage. "Get off the car and stand next to Ye Chen." Everyone was surprised and couldn't help but look at the man. The man is young, with elegant and handsome appearance. He looks to be in his early 20s at most. His eyebrows are lowered, making him appear quiet and low-key. Who is this person? Actually riding in the same carriage with the ninth princess? Ninth sister. A carriage next to it slowly stopped, the curtain opened, and a man wearing a silver brocade robe and a dignified and graceful woman stepped out. Ye Chen raised his eyebrows slightly. Brother 3 emperors, sister-in-law 3 emperors. The visitors were Ye Lingtian, the third-ranked prince of the Shu kingdom, and his princess Wu. When I learned that ninth sister was back, I originally wanted to host a banquet in the palace to entertain ninth sister, but I didn't expect that the first emperor would take the lead. Ye Lingtian smiled faintly, as if he was a little regretful, and his eyes fell on the man next to Ye Chen. There was a look in his eyes. "Jumei, this palace has just recently acquired a male favorite." Ye Chen spoke calmly, as if he was completely unaware of anything wrong with what he said. "Wrong ting." Just before going out, Yunding made a simple disguise at the princess mansion. After dressing up, her appearance was more beautiful than before, and her facial features also looked softer, so she was not worried about being recognized at this time. Yunding is from Juxiao Pavilion, and the surname of the pavilion master of Juxiao Pavilion is wrong. It is not agreed to let him temporarily take the surname of the pavilion master. Male favorite? Ye Lingtian's face changed slightly, and he could hardly believe what he heard. 9 sisters. The woman next to him also widened her eyes in surprise and looked at Ye Chen in shock, as if she had just met her. After all, for a noble princess to talk about male favorites in front of her brother and sister-in-law, it is simply too deviant and shocking. The failure to marry in Dazhu this time shows that this princess is a woman who is despised by others. Even if she can return to Shu, her future marriage will not be smooth. Ye Chen said lightly, "Rather than forcing someone who is unwilling to do so, there is nothing wrong with being my princess's consort, rather than enjoying myself in time." Ye Lingtian's expression turned gloomy, but he was speechless. In the past, he would have scolded him for being immoral. However, things are different now. Even if he feels dissatisfied, he can only tolerate it temporarily and angrily advise, "Jumei, don't make fun of your own reputation, my daughter. The honor of the family cannot bear to be so ruined. Brother 3 emperors are worrying too much. Since I have no intention of getting married, why should I care about my reputation?" Ye Chen smiled faintly. "Besides, I am not the only one who raises male favorites. Someone has set a precedent." I am just follow and follow. Yu Lingtian's face turned green. Jumei, please don't talk nonsense. Nonsense. Ye Cheng raised his lips nonchalantly. Whether my princess is talking nonsense or not, brother Three Emperors knows clearly. Besides, even if it reaches her ears, I have nothing to fear. Why should brother Three Emperors be so nervous? Ye Lingtian was completely speechless. Why hadn't he noticed that this ninth sister was so cunning and difficult to deal with before? Go in. Ye Cheng turned around and walked into the palace gate. There are people coming and going in the palace, and we are standing here blocking others' way. Yunting followed her without saying a word. His eyebrows were as gentle as jade, reserved and quiet, and he behaved like a gentleman. In name, it is a banquet to welcome the wind and cleanse the dust. In fact, everyone knows the purpose of such a grand banquet. Men and women sit separately in the shogunate's palace, so after entering the palace, Ye Cheng will be led by the maid to the orchid garden where the royal family members are, and Yun Pavilion. Young Master Rong, you can come with me. Ye Lingtian took the initiative and said, Nine sisters, don't worry. Ye Cheng nodded and looked at Yunting. No need to be formal. Yunting hummed, thank you, third prince. Ye Lingtian said you're welcome and separated from Ye Cheng. The man's seat was set up in the Pomo pavilion built by the lake. Turning around the front yard and walking up the winding corridor, the scenery outside the corridor was elegant and quiet. Servants came and went, and they would stop and salute respectfully when they passed by the nobles, and dared to stand up and leave only after the nobles passed by. Where is Mr. Rong's ancestral home? Ye Lingtian asked calmly. Yunting didn't say anything, as if he didn't hear it. Ye Lingtian frowned. Mr. Rong has an outstanding demeanor, he must be from a noble family, right? Is a man of 7 feet tall really willing to serve others with his beauty, not afraid of humiliating the family's reputation? I am alone, I don't care about the family's reputation. Yunting said, the princess is good to me, I am willing to serve her with my beauty, no one can interfere. Ye Lingtian's expression was slightly angry. Since ancient times, those who serve others with their beauty will not have a good end. Really, Yunting raised his lips, to die under the peony flower, even as a ghost is romantic. I just want to live happily with the princess, enjoy some wealth and glory, and enjoy life in time. As for what will happen in the future, it is not within my consideration. Ye Lingtian was choked to a pale face, and his expression instantly became gloomy.